The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Hey, welcome, Houston. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in the areas of legal, health, home improvement, and financial. Today, we have got what I think is one of the greatest estate planning attorneys, not only just in Houston, but in the whole state of Texas. I've got so many questions, your questions that you wrote in. So I want to get to her right away. Attorney Julia Dean, she's the managing attorney of the Dean Law Firm here in Houston. She's recognized by her colleagues and clients as a lawyer of distinction and top lawyer in multiple awards throughout the years. I can see why she's won so many awards. Her practice focuses primarily in estate planning, probate, guardianship, elder law, and special needs. We have been talking about special needs, but your questions are, a lot of them are basic questions that there's probably questions that people are afraid to ask, and you're going to get all the answers today. Now, here's how you can get your question in. You can call us at 561-623-9429. That's 561-623-9429. You can also text us at 954-336-3767. And if you're watching on TV, right next to the monitor, you can write your question in. Good afternoon, Julia.
Hi, good afternoon. So great to see you.
How is the weather in Houston?
Hot, H-O-T, hot. It's been over 100 for weeks now with very little relief. Relief is like 99.
I understand. That's the way it is here in Florida. And you know what that means? It means the waters are warm. And when you're on the Gulf, or as we are here in Florida on the Atlantic, warm water is not good.
No. We don't want those hurricanes, but yeah.
So let's get started. First of all, I just want everybody to know that they can reach us during the show. And I am going to put in your phone number up in just a second. First of all, because we're getting so many people, new people, all the time coming on the, to listen to the show. Tell everybody about your practice.
Well, our law firm is the Dean Law Firm, and we are in Sugarland, in the Sugarland area, but we have clients from all over the state and sometimes actually all over the country. We do primarily estate planning, which is trust and wills and powers of attorney and other things that you're thinking of, from simple to very complex and high net worth clients. We deal with special needs, guardianships, probate, and elder law. So those other sections or types of law all really intersect together. I ended up in this area of law after being in commercial litigation and then civil appellate law because I really wanted to spend time with my clients. I wanted to proactively help people or come alongside them in a really difficult time, like in a guardianship or probate. I was just getting more and more removed from people, and that is not my heart. I want to be right up with them, helping them and listening to them and not feeling rushed, but just having the time to deal with those issues. And so the practice really became my heart, and just how I wanted to run the practice. And I've just been so grateful that it's been something that clients really do want. They want that personal connection and someone who really listens to them. And our goal is to provide excellent work so then when they leave, they have peace of mind. And, what's better than that, having peace of mind when your kids are taken care of or your loved ones are taken care of.
Julia, I have got to share this with our audience, and I'll send you the names, but we've actually had in the last 2 months 3 attorneys who specialize in estate planning, and they heard your show and they wanted a show too, and we told them that you were already doing estate planning. All 3 of them spoke really highly of you, and
thank you.
That's unusual, because usually when somebody calls and they say, I heard your show, and they usually say they're better, they're more experienced, their rates are better. But all 3 of these all said she is really good. And that's hard to accomplish.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's an honor, and I appreciate that. And I feel, that it's a blessing.
Telling you that.
Yeah, well, I love working with them too, and it's a great community out there, and I really appreciate that.
How far does your practice extend to? Because I notice we're starting to get letters now from Huntsville and Galveston. How far does your practice extend?
All over Texas, really. I'm licensed in Texas, so I can handle any trust or estate planning or probate or whatever in Texas. I do have an attorney that's licensed in California and also maybe licensed in other states soon too. And so our reach is expanding. Sometimes we're doing trusts for people in other states that want trusts that are Texas trusts. So we're even dealing with clients there. We have a lot of people that also are expats and are in another country, and this may be their home base, but they haven't been here in years. And we can do things remotely for them as well. So we can have an online notary who can help us with making sure documents are notarized. It's a little more challenging with a will, but we can get it done in a variety of ways. We've gotten really creative. With COVID, it's caused us to learn all of the technology and be very creative in how we go about signing and dealing with clients, whether they're in the hospital and we can't get to them, so we can still take care of them.
Well, I've got a shock for you, and probably a shock for our audience. And I don't even know if I'm explaining this right. We have been told that we cannot use the word that starts with a C anymore. How about that one? RP. If you know what the P stands for. We are told by, I think it's Facebook, but it might be YouTube. We're not allowed to use those terms anymore. So we're, again, being told what we can say and what we can't say. How about that for one?
Wow.
Shock.
Yeah.
Anyway,
hopefully I won't violate that because I don't know what you're talking about.
Good. Okay. So if you'd like to call in, our phone number here is 561-623-9429. We're talking about estate planning. Julia, is estate planning different today than it was, say, several years ago? Because it is sad that, we're seeing young kids passing away, athletes passing away. Is it different now than it was 2 or 3 years ago?
I think there's a different level of awareness that has come through the pandemic, and just we don't like to think about the fact that we're all mortal, including our young children and our young adults. And so, when someone turns 18, we really need to have the legal documents in place to handle medical decisions and financial decisions, and a will to handle their estate if they have any assets at all. And so I think it's just the awareness is really there. The laws change all the time, but as far as in this area, it flexed as far as our ability to handle signings and different things remotely. But that's kind of gone back to how it was, except for in the court system. We still have the option with most courts to still do remote hearings on Zoom. And that has been really nice, especially for our uncontested probates. Usually other matters that are contested or guardianships will still need to be in person. But for something that's just a few minutes hearing and a probate, it really does make sense that it's uncontested, that it be remote.
Okay, we're going to start off with William. William is from Houston. He wants to know what happens if I don't have a will. Am I not going to be around anyways? Would my spouse get everything anyway?
No, not necessarily. And that is a common misconception about whether or not a spouse would automatically inherit. So if you don't have a will, the state of Texas is going to write you a will instead.
Oh.
And it may not be, and it probably won't be what you want. Now, sometimes it is, and we luck out, but other times it's not. And we can do no planning around that either. We can't do any trust planning or tax planning or asset protection planning or divorce protection planning. I mean, that's just all out the door if you haven't done anything. So the state of Texas comes in and they will determine who your heirs are. Now, to do that, it's a different kind of probate process. It's called a determination of heirship. And in order to have that hearing, before that hearing, an attorney ad litem is appointed. And that attorney ad litem's job is to find out if there's any other heirs out there and so they're doing their research, they're investigating the family, they're talking to witnesses, and they're deciding if these people are actually the heirs. And so there's a whole process. And so, of course, it takes longer because we have witnesses and you have another attorney involved. And of course, then it's more costly because of the time and additional attorneys involved. Now, when we are looking at who gets what, it determines the questions are kind of twofold. Whose property is it? Is it your separate property? Is it your community property with your wife? And the other question is, are you married? And if you're married, do you have children? And are all those children your children and your wife's children? Or are there some children that are not your spouse's children? So if, William, in this example, if your wife has other children that are not your children, or you have other children that are not hers, then all of your 1/2 community property is going to go down to your children only and not to your spouse. Now, if they were all your children, then it would go to your spouse, all of your community property, but not all of your separate property. So only 1/3 of your separate property would go to your spouse and 2/3 would go to your family. So that could be your children if you have it. If you don't have children, then it would go to your parents. If your parents are not alive, your siblings, and down to your nieces, nephews, etc. So it's a kind of a more, there's a matrix there of who gets what and how they get it, but it isn't automatic that our spouse gets it. And that's true even if on the deed to your home, it has both names listed. If it has both names listed and it has husband and wife, which is what it almost always says in Texas, because that's the default for our title companies, because we are in a community property state, you have the right to do whatever you want to with your 1/2 community share. So if it doesn't say with right of survivorship, which most of them don't, then your 1/2 property will go according to the state of Texas. And that may be directly to your children or parents or someone else, not your spouse. Now, your spouse will keep her 1/2 community property interest in any separate property she has. But just imagine what that will do to them. You know, how will your spouse feel if 1/2 of the property is owned by them and 1/2 of your estate is owned by children or parents or someone else? And so she would get a life estate in the homestead, but any other property would be different. And so she'd have the right to live there. But believe me, that we've gone through a lot of these, and it's really hard for those children who think they should have it right now to wait on that spouse to die. So it's always better if we can take care of our spouse. And then we can also think about, okay, do we do some trust planning for them? Do we have a tax issue? Do we want to maximize our retirement plans? There's a lot of different things we can do if we're pre-planning. But if we're just coming along afterwards, we can't do that. And very rarely will a court order a trust to be created unless we have a special needs individual.
So it's called estate planning, and now we know why. You've got to plan. You can't wait because it could be too late.
It could, yes.
Let's go to Lucy in Houston. Hi, Julia. I love your show. Can you explain probate?
Yeah, so probate is the court-ordered or court-supervised process where we take your will, if you have a will, and if not, it would be like the determination of heirship I just explained. But we would take your will, your original will, and submit it to the court with an application to probate the will. So the mere fact that you have a will is not enough. Instead, what needs to happen is that the court needs to look it over and check it out and make sure that, yes, this is a valid will. And if so, they will give it a stamp of approval, and it will then be a will that can be acted upon. Now, you name an executor in your will. Now, that executor has no authority, even if they're taking the will to the different financial institutions, that isn't enough. They have to have the authority from the court. So in that same hearing, they'll qualify that executor. And so basically, if they don't have a felony, we can usually get them qualified as executor. And then they receive what's called letters testamentary. Letters testamentary is authority from the court to handle the estate, to sell the house, to gather the assets from the accounts, to pay the bills, to pay the expenses, to pay taxes, and then to ultimately make distributions to your beneficiaries. There are some still requirements to the court, even if it's an independent administration, which is the least amount of supervision by the court. We still have to give notices to creditors, secured creditors directly, and to unsecured creditors by a notice in the newspaper. There's notices to beneficiaries, and then ultimately an inventory has to be prepared. Now, sometimes that inventory has to be filed with the court, which is a public process, which it can be very invasive because it shows all your assets and it lists the amounts, and and of course they know who your beneficiaries are because they have your will. And sometimes we can file an affidavit in lieu of filing that inventory. And that really just allows us to keep the inventory private. But sometimes the court orders that. Usually when we have a contest or we have creditors out there, they require that. Otherwise, we can keep it private. Another best way to keep it private is, of course, go the living trust route that we have talked about on other shows, but certainly we can talk about more any other time.
What makes probate so expensive, Julia?
So it's really, there's just attorney time and preparing all the applications, dealing with witnesses or creditors, dealing with the court requirements, the hearings, the notices. In Texas, it's not, if we have an uncontested probate, it generally is not super expensive, but it definitely is more expensive when you go through that and do a will versus a living trust. So it costs more upfront for a living trust, but overall it's going to cost a whole lot more to go through the probate. And especially for a married couple when we're going through at least 2 probates. And anywhere where you have real estate in another state, well, then you're going to be going through probate in that state too. So let's say it's a married couple and they have a place here and they have a place in Florida. They're going to be going through probate here twice, for husband and wife, and then also 2 probates in Florida, husband and wife. So that's 4 probates. So the more probates we can avoid by putting that into a living trust or another trust would be very cost effective for clients.
We're going to go to Keith in Huntsville. he says that he listens to a lot of shows on W4CY. He just found your show and he's really enjoying it. He said, I thought you didn't have to go through probate if you have a will. Why do you need to take a will through the probate process?
That is a common misconception too, that once you have a will, and especially one done by an attorney and you know everything's done right, why do you have to go through probate? Well,
Right.
because it's not effective until the judge says it is. So the court is with a will has to look at it, make sure all the formalities, we call it, which means it just meets the law's requirements. So they look through that, make sure it's been all met, and they qualify your executors. So just the fact that you named the executor, as I mentioned, doesn't mean they're going to be appointed and given letters testamentary to handle the estate. If they think they're not qualified, they're not going to issue that letter, and they're going to require someone else to step in, or maybe the court will appoint an executor to handle it for you if they don't feel like they're qualified. So yes, you do have to go through probate when you have a will, if you have any assets that are probate assets. So there are some non-probate assets, like if we have something with a beneficiary designation, if it's a valid one, they haven't predeceased you, for example, then that would trump your will, and it would go directly to that person.
Here's Howard from your neck of the woods, Sugar Land.
Oh, great.
How long can the probate process take with the will or without a will?
Okay. Generally, it will last about 6 to 8 months from when a client comes in, we get the application filed. It usually takes 2 to 3 months to get into the court. That could be longer, but usually that's what we find. It's another 90 days before we finalize all the requirements to the court of the notices that need to go out and the inventory that needs to be prepared. So if it goes really quickly, that usually is about 8 months. Sometimes we can do it quicker. By usually 3 months, maybe 4, we have those letters testamentary in our hands, and the executor can now handle the estate. On occasion, we can get it done sooner, but there is no emergency probate proceeding. And this is what we find happens a lot. Let me give you this example. You want to sell the home because the estate is eating away at the assets, and it's taking your own money to pay for the house expenses, and you just want to get on the market and get it sold. There's not a whole lot of other assets out there. And so they get a buyer in place, and then they get through the title company, and about usually 2 to 3 days before closing, they will get a call from the title company that says, I'm sorry, but this needs to be probated before we can finalize the estate and transfer the deed, because we need clean title. And the only way we can do that is through probate. So we get a call and we need this done in a few days. That's not going to happen. It's going to take usually quickest, probably 2 months, and probably 2 to 3 months just to get the authority to close that estate. So it's really important to get in right away and start that process when you have a will and it needs to be probated. Now, when we don't have a will, it does take longer, because remember, we have that attorney ad litem, which is another attorney that comes in and starts to do some investigation. And I'm going to be as representing the person who wants to handle the estate, which would be the administrator in that situation. I would be interviewing those witnesses first, and then the attorney ad litem would be interviewing them, and then they're going to do some independent research. So it takes a much longer before we're ready to even ask the court for a hearing. There may be waivers that need to be filed or other documents that need to be filed to get us to the point where we can have that hearing. Now, at that hearing, once they determine who the heirs are, we also may need someone who's appointed as administrator to handle the estate. So usually it's a 2-part hearing, determine who the heirs are, and then let's get someone qualified to administer this estate and take care of all the assets.
Here's George in downtown Houston. Who is the best to take care of handling my estate?
Someone you trust implicitly. So that can be a relative, it could be a friend. If you don't have someone like that, then it would be a corporate trustee can come in, or an attorney, another professional that you might trust, like a CPA, could step in. Usually we see attorneys or corporate trustees as the one who would be appointed. If you're not in a place where you have someone that you can trust with handling your assets, whether that's as an executor or later as trustee, that's all really important, that you have someone that you have no doubts of how they're going to handle the estate. Now, a lot of people like to maybe put all their children, and that is something we definitely can do, but I want you to think about that, because that's very cumbersome and sometimes causes issues and strife with each other. So let's say we have 3 kids and you want them all to agree. You better make sure that they can handle just discussions together in a positive way and disagreements together. Otherwise, it could cause a lot of impasse. So we just don't want that scenario where we're causing issues between your children or family members where we really didn't need to. And sometimes the cost of having a professional trustee or executor is well worth it for preserving family harmony.
Do the kids ever come back later on and say, I was too young, I didn't understand? I want more now that I do understand.
Want more of the estate?
Yes, more of the estate.
Well, you have people that do come back. Usually, at least with our wills, we put a very strong no contest clauses. So if they do try to get something different than their loved one gave them, that they would lose everything. And so it just prevents these kind of crazy, coming back and wanting more or whatever. But yeah, people will be people. Sometimes that will happen, and we deal with it.
Why in the world would someone try to handle this themselves? I mean, we learn from you. There is so much to learn, to know about wording and what you can do. And I just can't imagine why somebody would want to do their own estate planning.
Well, it's kind of an analogy of what I want to make my own decisions medically instead of a doctor who's trained. And even for other areas of law that I am not familiar with, or even if I am and I'm not sharp in that area, I would not represent myself. It would be someone else, another attorney representing me. Because, just like with medicine, the law has become very specialized. I just say, except for out in the rural communities, it's very rare to find a general practitioner in that area.
Yes.
And you just really need someone who is focused on one area and really experienced in that area.
Well, I don't know where the time goes by, but every time we do one of your shows, it feels like 5 minutes, and it's actually been 30 minutes. For the people who are listening on air, Julia, give them your phone number.
Thank you. Yes, my phone number is 281-277-3326. And my website is juliadeanlaw.com. So JuliaDeanlaw.com. Thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, and I don't do this very often, we're in 9 cities now, and some of our shows, like Houston, there's 2 hours long. I got to tell you, I definitely endorse attorney Julia Durham, because she's got such a big heart. She knows estate planning. And you know what? You got to feel comfortable with your attorney when it comes. This is very private and personal things that you're working on. Julia, we are so blessed to have you. And
to be here.
You will be back with us again in a couple weeks.
2 weeks. Yes. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Here. Thank you so
Pleasure.
much. That's attorney Julia Durham. She's with us twice a month. Just a world of information. We will be back with you next week with more Ask the Experts. Please tune in then. See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.